This story takes place around the middle of Jesus' ministry time on earth, and the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, had already begun to work against Jesus, since he and his teachings threatened their power and influence over the people. They were afraid to lose their high position in society, so they were against Jesus because of that. Now Jesus and his disciples were traveling along the roads of Israel when they saw a man by the side of the road. And this man had been blind for his entire life, ever since he had been born. The disciples saw him and spoke out, believing that such a condition must have been the penalty for some wrongdoing. "Rabbi," they said to Jesus, "who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" But Jesus, instead of talking of it as a punishment, said instead, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And after he had said this, he spit on the ground, stirred the saliva and the dirt together, and put the mud on the man's eyes, and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." And the word Siloam means sent. Now the man must have been very confused as to why a stranger had come up to him and put mud on his eyes, but he trusted that there was something behind this, and so he went and he washed, and suddenly he could see. Now, naturally, the people that had known him for all his life were somewhat confused about this, and they wondered whether it was actually the same man. And so they said to him, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" And some said yes, he was, and some said no, he only looks like him. But the man said, "No, I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they asked. A reasonably obvious question under the circumstances. And so the man told them. "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." So the people of the town took the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, as I mentioned, were not in favor of Jesus and his ministry at this point, or really at any point. And the Pharisees also had many, many rules about religious observances and precise things that people had to do to be considered righteous. And it happened, or it was meant to happen, that the day on which Jesus had healed the man had been the Sabbath. So the Pharisees talked to the man, and they asked him how he had received his sight. And so he said about Jesus, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and now I see." And so the Pharisees couldn't agree what they thought about Jesus after that, because some of them said, "This man is not from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath." And some said, "But how can a sinner perform such signs?" And so they asked the man who had been blind again, "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." And the man replied, "He is a prophet." The Pharisees were still skeptical over this, and so they actually sent for the man's parents, and they asked them, "Is this your son? Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see?" Because they wanted to make certain that this wasn't some trick. They wanted to make certain the man had been blind at all. But the parents were afraid, because the Pharisees had said that anyone who acknowledged Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, would be thrown out of the synagogue, would be ostracized from the worship center of the people. And so the parents dodged the question. They said, "We know he is our son, and we know he was born blind, but how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age, he will speak for himself." So they summoned again the man who had been born blind, and they said, "Give glory to God by telling the truth. We know this man is a sinner." And the man replied, "Whether Whether he, Jesus, is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. And so the Pharisees asked him again, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" The man was tired of being asked this question, and so he said, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" The Pharisees didn't like to hear that. They were angry at the man. They hurled insults at him, and they said to him, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." But the Pharisees were not convinced. So they said to the man, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Now, though the Pharisees had thrown the man out and wanted nothing more to do with him, Jesus had not forgotten him. Jesus heard that he had been thrown out by the Pharisees, and so he went and looked for him, and he found him. And when he found him, he said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" That is, the Messiah, the Christ. And the man answered, "Who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." And Jesus answered this question of his, this searching. And he said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." And the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped Jesus then. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind may see, and those who see will become blind." Now there were Pharisees nearby, possibly keeping an eye on the man. Who knows? And they heard this, and they took offense at it. And they said, "What? Are we blind too?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." The Pharisees went on, however, claiming that they could see and not wanting to believe Jesus' word. But the man born blind, who could now see, who had had an experience with the light of the world, he believed and he worshipped.